What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Between Two Tackles. I'm your host, Alex Spinelli, and alongside me, as always, is Ray Volo. Ray, my man, how we doing? We're here. We finally made it. The college football season is here.
Dude, it's not quite here yet. It's we
It's
still got
here.
still got what, like 10 days, but it's there. I
Whoa, whoa,
smell it.
whoa!
I'm. Are we counting this week? We counting
Put
Saturday?
some respect on week 0.
Okay. Well, I worry about championship caliber teams, and we're not playing until next week. So, but yeah, no, it's about here. It's the eve of battle, but I'm pumped up. Just football season in general. Jets absolutely torched the Giants today in the joint practice. So I'm ready. I'm ready for both the national championship and the Super Bowl. Uh, I may get them both tatted on me. Who knows? But we're confident here.
Damn. Oh, put that in writing right now. If they do, you'll get tats.
Even better, recording. We got it.
Love it. What about if Penn State wins a national championship?
We'll get the Penn State in a little bit, I think.
All right. So we got our college football preview show today. I'm so excited to do this. This was always a really fun episode for us each season leading into the college football season. We are going to give you our conference champs. We're going to give you a dark horse from each team, from each conference that could possibly win. And then we're also going to give you our best bet from each conference. We are one conference light this year. Shout out to Pac-12.
R.I.P. in peace.
Good for Washington State. They're already in the Pac-12 championship. That's going to be a really fun one. I can't wait for that. For those two teams to battle it out, man.
Dude, no Pac-12 is going to be really strange. It's just the fact that you got Stanford in the ACC and you got UCLA in the Big Ten. It's a wild world we're living in.
It really is the Wild West. And this season, unlike any other season, it's going to be really interesting with these coastal trips for some of these teams, a lot of flights for a lot of these teams that are not used to that. It's going to be very, very interesting. But let's kick it off. We're going to start with the ACC to start our college preview. So the undefeated season heard around the world was the big storyline from the ACC last year, with Florida State going undefeated and then being left out of the college football playoff after Jordan Travis got hurt. The Seminoles then proceeded to sue the ACC and are looking to leave the conference. I'm sure in the next year or so, we are going to find out more information about what's going on with Florida State, where they will ultimately end up. I feel like it'll probably end up being the SEC, and then maybe even by then, we won't even have conferences anymore. So who knows about that? But they are the reigning champs, and they are in the pole position once again with the best odds on bovadasportsbook.com to win the ACC at plus 290, with Clemson just behind them at plus 350. Those two teams have won 12 of the last 13 conference championships. They have been dominant, but there's new blood in the ACC. Like we have mentioned, Cal, Stanford, and SMU have joined the conference, and there are a bunch of teams looking to make a splash this year. Miami, who's had a ton of transfers come in, NC State, who's got a pretty good roster, Louisville coming off a really good first season under Jeff Brom, and then Virginia Tech with the most returning production in the country. The ACC will open up its season with Florida State at number 10, Clemson at number 14, Miami at number 19, and NC State at number 24. On Bovada Sportsbook right now, I'll give you the top odds for the conference winners. Like we mentioned, Florida State at plus 290, Clemson at plus 350, Miami is plus 400, NC State is plus 650, Virginia Tech is plus 1,000. Ray, we'll start with the conference champ. Who's winning the ACC this year?
This is one of the two tougher ones I had. I was going back and forth on a couple teams. There's no team in this group that I really just am in love with. So I'm going to go with the defending champs. I'm going with Florida State. I think this is a team that has a huge chip on their shoulder, obviously, after the way the season ended last year. But that being said, there's a ton of turnover, especially on offense. They lost their top 3 pass catchers. Jordan Travis is gone. Trey Benson is gone. So it's going to be, I think this is going to be a team that's going to be carried a lot by their defense, especially early on the season. Obviously, you got DJU transferring in as quarterback, who's bounced around from Clemson, Oregon State. Big body. He played pretty well last year for Oregon State. They were a surprise team in thinking the Pac-12. He's not going to, I don't think he's the guy that everyone thought he was going to be coming in as a recruit. He was like, obviously a big time I think he was a 5-star at one point, but I think he'll play efficient football. I think this is a team that's going to need to run the ball heavy. They returned 4 of their 5 offensive linemen, if I'm not mistaken, and they brought in 2 guards, Richie Leonard from Florida and Terrence Ferguson the second from Alabama. So this offensive line should be a really strong unit. So I think it's going to be old school football. Just run the ball. Hopefully DJU can protect it a little bit and just rely on that defense, because that defense still has some dogs on that side of the ball. Patrick Payton, we talked about him on the Edge episode a little bit at least.
Mm-hmm.
He's someone who's ultra athletic off the edge, and they also added in Marvin Jones Jr. From Georgia, who should help kind of bolster that edge rush with my boy Jared Verse going to the NFL. And then this is a secondary too that their cornerback duo in Fentrell Cypress and Thomas, really, really stout, good ball skills. I think they both had double-digit pass deflections in their career. So I think this is going to be a team that's going to have to rely on their defense. And hopefully by the time midseason comes along, that offense is rolling full gears. But luckily for them, they don't really have that tough of a schedule. Clemson, they get at home midway through the year, I think week 7-ish. And then they go to Notre Dame, but I don't think that really affects conference standings or anything. And then at Miami is always going to be tough, but I don't know. I'm not a believer in Miami this year. I don't think Cam Ward's as good as people are kind of hyping him up to be, even though they have been recruiting at a high level. So for me, I'm going Florida State.
Yeah, I think they're in line to have another really good season. I agree. I think it's going to be a run-heavy team and rely on their defense, and I do like the upside of Patrick Payton and Marvin Jones Jr. And Fentrell Cypress was a guy that I really liked coming out of summer last year. I think he kind of had a down year this past season, but apparently all reports of camp has said that he's looking awesome. So be exciting to see them. I am picking the aforementioned Miami Hurricanes and Cam Ward. I think this is just the best roster on paper, and they got to put it all together. With Mario Cristobal, I think he's done a good, not great job. He's done a really good job of getting talent with that team, but hasn't done a great job of coaching up that team. So I think with all the transfers that they've had, all the weapons that they've added, they are my favorite to win the conference. They're plus 425 on Bovada right now. With their schedule, they avoid Clemson. They get Virginia Tech and Florida State. Both games are at home. So I think if they can avoid taking a knee in any game that they really need to win, I think that'll be big for them. Shout out Georgia Tech. Cam Ward, like we mentioned, the transfer, I think he's now the best quarterback in the conference. They had 22 turnovers last year. If he can cut that down, I know he's had some turnover problems in the past himself, but I think if he can cut that down, I think they're going to be very tough on offense, mainly because they are just loaded at wide receiver. Xavier Restrepo had over 1,000 yards out of the slot last year. Jacoby George also returns for this Miami team who had 800 yards, and they also brought in Samuel Brown from Houston after having 800 yards in 2023. They also brought in Damian Martinez, really good running back out of Oregon State. And now they have 2 good backs with him and Mark Fletcher behind a really good offensive line that features Jalen Rivers and Francis Muoga. Completely butchered that last name for sure, but 2 very good tackles for them. So I think they're going to be really, really tough on offense. The defensive line's got a lot of new faces. No more Leonard Taylor. But like I mentioned, Francis Muoga, his brother, Francisco Muoga. How crazy is that? Francis and Francisco. Like, what are we doing?
Francis was the 5-star, right? He's a 5-star tackle.
That's classic. That's classic Jerzon Newton, right? The Newton family had like 5 brothers that all had the same name.
Yeah, I forgot about that tidbit.
Right. This D-line, like I said, a bunch of new faces, but with Francisco, Ruben Bain, who had 7.5 sacks last year, and Tyler Barron, really good edge player, transfer from Tennessee. They should be strong up front. My question for them is in the secondary. They have a lot of transfers and a lot of young guys coming in to help them out. No more Cam Kitchens and James Williams on the back end. So I think for them, the corners for sure, who steps up is going to be big for them. But I think this could be a top 15 offense in the country. So I'm taking Miami.
Yeah, I don't hate the pick. I think I was a Miami believer last year, if I'm not mistaken.
You were.
Because they are recruiting at such a high level, both in high school and in the portal. Just Mario Cristobal leads a lot to be desired, I think.
Yes.
And also I'm just not a Cam Ward guy. So I don't know if I could pick them in a conference like this. I was very close to picking Clemson, but
So was I, but I had nightmares of last year.
that and Clemson's like first month plus is just an absolute horror show. So I
Mhm.
can see them absolutely folding quick and it becoming a disaster, or maybe they fight through their adversity and then who knows, maybe they do make the at least the conference finals.
Yeah, with Clemson too, I kept going back and forth. Like their depth, they have no depth like at any position,
Well, they don't use the portal.
which is just really scary because you guys get banged up a little bit like they did last year, especially like that wide receiver room. Like they were depleted. They had like two guys on scholarships playing wide receiver last year.
That's
Like
insanity.
they had fucking me and you playing wide receiver for them last year. I was pretty dominant, but let's talk about some dark horses. Who you got as your dark horse to win the ACC?
I'll let you go first. We'll alternate just so.
Okay. My dark horse to win the conference, Florida State. For those for those who watched last year, shout out you guys. We love you guys.
All time, our number 7th ranked team in the country was his dark horse to win.
Bro, I mean, who came out on top there? Florida State conference champions. My dark horse won the conference.
I'm pretty sure I picked them to win the conference.
That was great. I'm taking Virginia Tech. They're plus 1,000 on Bovada right now. I think that line is kind of crazy, honestly. I think this team is really, really good.
Spoiler alert, I picked Virginia Tech too. When I saw that plus 1,000 line, I was pretty stunned just with obviously the continuity this team has. But you go ahead and give your little synopsis first.
That was by far the biggest hammer I've had of all the bets I took it in this. I smashed that immediately. I ran to the counter. Their schedule is pretty favorable too. They get Rutgers at home. They're at Miami, and then they're home versus Clemson. They avoid Florida State, Louisville, and SMU. They return all 11 starters on offense. They have 9 returning on defense. They have 86% of the production coming back. That is top in the country. And they added Aeneas Peebles from Duke to be a star on the defensive line. And Brent Pry has done a really good job with this team. Shout out State. Just a really good job with this team, a really good job with this defense. But man, I love me some Kyron Drones, man. He's one of my favorite players in the country last year. I think one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country with his dual threat ability. Over 2,000 yards passing last year, 800 more on the ground. He and Tutton make a really good duo in the backfield. Very hard to stop. All 4 wide receivers are back for Kyron Drones. They're all graduate players. So I love all this continuity that they have. I love all the seniority that they have on this team and especially on this offense. But this defense is the makeup and the heartbeat of this team. One of the best defenses in the country. We mentioned Peebles, but Antoine Powell-Ryland, one of the most slept on edges in the country, at 9.5 sacks last year. They also have a really underrated player in Cole Nelson, who also comes off the edge. I think the secondary is strong. Dorian Strong, good player. Mansour Delane, 2 good corners back there. I think they need to be a little bit better stopping the run this year. In their losses last year, they really got gashed. They brought in Sam Brumfeld, transfer from Middle Tennessee, to play linebacker, had a really good season last year. Hopefully that helps them in the middle parts of the field in the run game. But man, I think they got all the talent and the continuity coming back that they can make some noise in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, that Drones at quarterback and Tutton, I think is how you pronounce his name, at running back. I think that's really the duo that's going to help this offense. This is a team that's going to run the ball a lot. And you mentioned that defense. And also just Lane Stadium. This is a team that when they're good, it's
very good.
It's a fun atmosphere to watch some football in. I just think with Clemson coming in at like week 10 or 11, I believe. I think if both, Clemson, who knows, like I mentioned before, they can be a boom or bust type of team, but Virginia Tech hosting them with like 1 or 2 losses with a chance to kind of like solidify an ACC title game, that place is going to be absolutely bumping. So this is a team I definitely expect to be in it till the very end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, Clemson coming in towards the end of the part of the season, like we just mentioned, not a lot of depth. They might come in a little bit banged up. That atmosphere is going to be crazy. I think this is a really, really good bet to take on Bovada. Plus 1,000, like I mentioned, to win the conference. Let's talk best bets for the ACC. What do you got?
So mine is I have NC State over 8.5 wins.
Ooh,
I don't know what I had it at. I think it was like plus one, minus 130-ish. Let me just double check that. But NC State is surprisingly, or not even surprisingly, I guess low key, just one of the most consistent teams, I think, in the country, in the conference rather. But yes,
mhm.
it was minus 130 that line. But this is a team, uh Duran, the head coach, has really just he's been there for well over I think 11 seasons now. He's had 9 winning seasons. I think his first 2 seasons maybe were losing, or maybe his first one and then one mixed in. But this is a team that closed the season really hot. They won their last 5 games last season. This season they don't have any top 10 opponents. They avoid Florida State. They're at Clemson, which is going to be a tough game, but I think that's right after the Clemson brutal stretch to start the season. So this is a team that I mentioned, like maybe Clemson's kind of just like absolutely just got they just got beat up the first month of the year. Maybe they're just kind of demoralized and given up. I think that's definitely a winnable game at Clemson. But I love how they have Grayson McCall at quarterback. I think it's really going to bring some stability. The change in scheme for McCall is going to be big. I mean, he ran a lot of option. He's not the best deep ball thrower. So I'm curious to see how he transitioned to this scheme, but he's someone who's played a lot of football at 4 years. He's got a ton of experience. I think he can lead this team to victories. And then this secondary returns 4 starters, and they added Jahee Carter from Ohio State. He's kind of like a safety nickel. So I think this defense is really strong. They're always good. And I think that secondary is going to lead them to a 9-win season.
Nice. Yeah, they had a ton of like transfers on the offensive side of the ball, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I think so. This is a team that there's a little the offense I think is going to look a lot different than it did last year for sure.
I know they brought in Jordan Waters, who's good back from Duke last year. Um, but I feel like they brought in a couple guys in the wide receiver room to help out McCall. So curious to see how the chemistry starts to build at the beginning of the season. But would you over 8.5? You said?
Yeah, 8.5. They have that big wide receiver, Kevin Concepcion, I think is how you
Yeah,
pronounced it.
Conception. Yeah, he's a good player.
I think he had around 800 yards last year, but he's a big body. I think McCall's going to really lean on him to get this passing attack going.
Nice. So I'll go here. My best bet. Shout out the newcomer Stanford. We're going over 3.5 for the Stanford Cardinal. Minus 160 on Bovada right now. We generally see these teams that move conferences in the last few years really struggle in the first year, but I think they could get to this number. It's 4. It's not that hard. Second year under Troy Taylor, I think this team played really hard, especially towards the end of the season for him. I also thought their quarterback, Ashton Daniels, played way better down the stretch. He struggled big time early in the season, and I think they can just throw to Alec Iomaner and Tiger Bachmeyer. They're also apparently very excited by this freshman that they have, Emmett Mosley, who's apparently been blowing up camp. So if they can get this offense going a little bit, the offensive line is the big question mark for me. This offensive line is so bad. We talked about it, I don't know on how many summer scouting episodes. I feel like every time we talk about a Pac-12 player, either like on the defensive line, and we watched the game where they played Stanford, they dominated. That's generally how it went. They were 118th in the country in sacks allowed last year with 41. So it can't get much worse for me. I think it just has to improve. The defense was bad everywhere too. Bottom 25 in yards allowed and points allowed. But the linebacker group has been getting a ton of love in camp. David Bailey, Tristan Sinclair, 2 really good players. I think they could get this number. Their non-conference is not too bad. So over 3.5 for Stanford.
I like it. I like going with the low total. I think I did that with Colorado last year, and it really worked out for me.
Yeah, paid off big time. All right, so just to recap, I have my champion as Miami, plus 425 to win the conference. Virginia Tech, plus 1,000 to win the conference as the dark horse. And then the best bet was Stanford, over 3.5, minus 160.
I like it. My winner was Florida State to win the conference. I think that was plus 290-ish. Dark horse was also Virginia Tech at plus 1,000. And then my best bet was NC State over 8.5 wins, minus 130.
Nice. Let's roll on to the Big Ten, the best conference in the country. Shout out State. Shout out Ohio State. Actually, fuck Ohio State.
Shocker.
The reigning national champs, the Michigan Wolverine, are no longer led by Jim Harbaugh and JJ McCarthy, but they are still the three-time defending champion in the Big 12. This conference got an influx of talent from the Pac 12 this season with Oregon, USC, UCLA, and Washington all joining the Big 10. The season's going to be very, very interesting. No more divisions. Thank God we can finally avoid Purdue making the conference championship and getting shellacked. Ohio State leads the way on Bovada at plus 150 to win the conference. They are loaded with a ton of players returning and some high-level transfers. Oregon is also going to be a force in the first year of the new look Big Ten with quarterback Dylan Gabriel transfers in from Oklahoma and a loaded wide receiver room. Penn State and Michigan will be in that second tier. They're going to be tough outs as always. I think this middle of the pack is going to be really interesting with USC, Iowa, Wisconsin, year 2 of Luke Fickell, Nebraska in year 2 of Matt Rule, and everybody's darling from Dirty Jersey. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights have a sneaky good roster this year. The season's going to open up with Ohio State at number 2, Oregon at number 3, Penn State at number 8, Michigan at number 9, USC at number 23, and Iowa at number 25. We'll give out some of the conference odds right now for the Big Ten. Like I mentioned, Ohio State plus 150 to win the conference on Bovada. Oregon is plus 200. Penn State is plus 500. Michigan is plus 700. USC is plus 2,000. And then it really drops off. Vegas really does see this as a 4-team race. Ray, who you got as your champs? Do I even have to say it? Can we move on?
Surprise, I'm going Ohio State here. I just think this is the best team that they've had, at least on paper. I want to say since like 2015 as a complete roster. They've absolutely dominated the transfer portal, bringing in Downs, Judkins, to name a few. Julian Sayin, who's probably going to win the backup job if I had to guess. McLaughlin playing center for them. But on offense, this is a team, I think with Will Howard going to be starting quarterback, they're going to run the shit out of the ball. Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins in the backfield is probably the best 1-2 punch in the country. And then out wide, you got Emeka Ibuka returning, Jeremiah Smith, the freshman phenom, who everyone's just absolutely raving about. I would not be surprised if he's their number one, pretty much right out of the gate. The things that they're saying out of camp with him is just insane. Hartline says he doesn't know anything he does wrong. He does bad. So he's a physical freak. I think he'll play that Marvin Harrison Jr. role for them. And then they have a ton of 5 stars in the wide receiver room. Brandon Innes, Carnell Tate. So there's no lack of talent in that room, to say the least. I guess really what their offense comes down to is their offensive line's ability to really, I guess, dig deep and win them games late with the running attack. I mean, this is going to be a run-heavy team, like I said. And then obviously, Will Howard just eventually he's going to have to win them games in a big-time moment. So whether he has the chops to do that's going to be big.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. I also have Ohio State at plus 150 on Bovada to win the conference. I barely wrote anything down for this team because I knew you were going to talk about them. But I did want to ask you, this team is so loaded. And, I mean, you haven't even touched on the defense.
I was going to say, just quickly, their defense is the best in the country. I don't even think
the defense is ridiculous. Like, as good as their players are on offense, this defense is so loaded, and this is going to be the heartbeat of their team. I mean, I don't know how many weeks that they're going to go. They have a pretty soft opening schedule. Like, they might go like 5 straight weeks without letting up a touchdown. That's how good they are. But if they are to slip up, let's say they're going to be in the playoffs. We'll call it what it is. If they are to slip up, what do you think is going to be the issue? Is it going to be the quarterback play, the offensive line, or Ryan Day?
I'm going to go quarterback play and or offensive line would be my only real concern.
Okay.
Just because, I mean, I guess in terms of the Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, we didn't even get to talk about Chip Kelly being the offensive coordinator of this team. I'm curious to see how this offense transforms from last year and I guess just the previous 4 or 5 years, because this rushing attack is going to have to be so heavy. And with a dual threat quarterback like Will Howard, I mean, we really haven't used like design quarterback runs that often, especially in the Day era. I mean, Justin Fields had some, but even Fields didn't. He was more just like
not really
kind of backyard ball. Yeah. You know what I mean? So they're going to need to let Will Howard run the ball by 7 to 10 times a game, I would assume, to really like I guess unlock his potential. So I guess my concern would be offensive line one, and then I guess Will Howard two. But
Okay.
even the offensive line is going to be good enough. I would assume the tackles, the right tackle really concerns me. But besides that, this team is pretty goddamn elite.
Yeah, I'm talking more like when we get to playoff time, like
Yeah,
when you got to go play Georgia, when you got to go play Texas, like can you block up front?
yeah.
Is that going to be the issue?
I think it's going to be come down to blocking up front, and then Will Howard feeling the pressure and making kind of a boneheaded play because he's a gunslinger at heart and he trusts that arm a little too much at Kansas State. But
Okay,
we'll see.
gotcha. All right, let's move on to the dark horses. You want to start here?
You can start. I just went on a rant.
Okay, I like listening to you rant though.
Hey,
Makes me feel good. Um, it feels weird calling them a dark horse, but I have Michigan as my dark horse. The three-time reigning Big Ten champ
I'll allow it.
is the dark horse of the season. Thanks, bro. They're plus 850 on Bovada to win the conference. So I think that counts as a dark horse. The new coaching staff, sort of, right? They got a lot of new guys and new roles. Should be interesting. The schedule is up and down. They have 3 really tough games with Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State, but they do get Texas and Oregon at home. So I think those, if they could split those games, I think that would be big for them. Man, I just think this defense is so good. They have so many good players that they're going to be in every single game. There's maybe only 4 teams in the country that can really block them up front. They arguably have 2 of the best defensive players in the country, and Mason Graham on the interior and Will Johnson at corner, but they're deep everywhere. Kenneth Grant is a monster in the middle. He's going to get more time this year. Josiah Stewart and Ernest Hoffman are formidable in the middle, and I think guys like Makari Page will pick up the slack for an injured Rod Moore, unfortunately, tore his ACL. I don't know if he's going to get back for this season. Most of my issues stem from the offensive side of the ball, but I think they do have enough to get it done, especially in a Big Ten where you can really grind out games. A lot of new faces on the offensive line, but I think they have a ton of pedigree up front. I think they're going to be tough and physical again. I do think Alex Orgy is going to end up winning this job. And I think they're just going to ground and pound with he and Donovan Edwards. I think the big question for me, though, is who are the playmakers on the perimeter? I think that's the big question that they need to answer. Colson Loveland is a really good tight end, and he's going to get a ton of work. But who are the wide receivers that step up? If I had to pick one guy, I think it'll be Tyler Morris. He caught a touchdown in the semifinal game versus Alabama, but with no Roman Wilson and no Cornelius Johnson, that room really doesn't have anybody that's played a lot of football for them. So I'm a little concerned, especially in those games where you're going to need to score against Texas, against Oregon, and against Ohio State. Who gets the ball on the outside, and can Orgy make enough throws to win games? But I think for the rest of their schedule, I think they're just going to physically dominate people, especially in the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I respect that. Them as a dark horse, I guess. I think that this team, they're going to be the same. They're going to be exactly what Harbaugh, like their identity was with him, just on steroids in the sense that they're just going to run the absolute shit out of the ball. And I think Orgy, he's going to win the starting job. He's going to run like a motherfucker because that guy is an athletic specimen.
I think he only has 1 completed pass in his entire career.
That's hysterical. I'm not surprised, but I think him and Donovan Edwards just in the backfield. It's just so just electric because of their athleticism. I think Donovan Edwards is one of the more underrated players. He's just a home run waiting to happen. Not the best vision, obviously, but when he gets a seam, he can take off. I'm just curious how this offensive line, like you mentioned, is going to hold up with the transition. And then just like you mentioned, I don't know if they're going to be able to keep up with some of these offenses in the conference now. I think Oregon and Ohio State are going to give them a lot of trouble. So I don't expect them to win the conference, but I mean, like you mentioned, they're 3-time defending champs. It's kind of hard not to respect them a little bit.
Right. Who you got?
My dark horse, I'm going with Nebraska. I was between them and Wisconsin.
Ugh.
Luke Fickell and Matt Rule are my boys. But at the end, I trust Matt Rule. This guy's a program builder. What he did at Baylor, he turned that school around so quick. I think in their second year, I think he turned them into a winning program. By the third year, they won 10 games. this team, it starts with their defense. They're returning 9 of 13 key contributors, and this defense was surprisingly good last year, 18.3 points per game. Rule runs at 3-3-5 defense too, which is a little tricky for some offenses to kind of figure out. Then on the offensive side of the ball, they added a couple of receivers in the transfer portal. Jamal Banks from Wake Forest, I believe. He had about 800 receiving yards last year. I think he had like maybe 600 the year before too. So he's a big body, 6'4". And then Isaiah Nayer from Texas, formerly of Nevada, I believe. He was a lot more. Was it Nevada or Wyoming? Sorry, pardon me. But he had 800 yards receiving in Wyoming in 2021. He's another big body. So they got two big bodies on the outside for their freshman phenom, Dylan Raiola. This is a tough pick for them as a dark horse to win the conference just because they got a 17, 18-year-old quarterback. So there's going to be some growing pains, but they have a pretty weak schedule for the first month or so.
Schedule.
Yeah. I think their first real, like, true test is week 8 against us at the Shoe. So assuming they can kind of
Rutgers.
Rutgers is a tough game, but are they home for that? I'm pretty sure
they're at home against Rutgers, but then their 3 ranked games are all on the road at Ohio State, at USC, at Iowa to end the season.
At Iowa, that should be a fun game to end the season. But I guess really all comes down to Dylan Raiola and just how much of a ceiling he has. I'm going with just for a ceiling pick, just because I think this defense's floor is so high as well. That if this phenom can really start turning heads as a freshman, they can make some noise.
Yeah, I mean, I love going with the unproven guys. We're going to get to some unproven guys like when we get to the SEC, and I got a lot of love for those boys. So I can't knock you for taking the 5-star. Let's talk best bets. Who you got best bet for the Big Ten?
Under 10.5 wins for Penn State, -265. This is
-265. What do you have, a fucking vagina?
Yeah, I'm hammering it. I think that Penn State, they have a tough schedule. I think they opened the year at West Virginia. That's an upset waiting to happen. I've been telling you this for weeks. I'm very excited.
I can't wait till they win by 2 scores.
Oh, ooh, 2 scores, big fucking whoop.
You're putting them on upset alert.
Yeah, they are. Dude, I mean, well, they're 10-point favorites, so we're saying they're going to cover. Sick. I think they're going to lose outright.
Yeah.
But they're also at USC, at Wisconsin is a tough game in my opinion. And then versus Ohio State and Washington at home, I think they dropped 3 of those. I don't see them getting above that 10.5 win mark. And for me, it just comes down to the passing attack and the skill position on the outside. I'm very curious to see how Julian Fleming helps elevate this passing attack, but they haven't been. I mean, last year was abysmal for someone like Drew Aller, who was kind of like hyped up to be the next great. They really need to figure some things out in this passing attack. I know they have their new offensive coordinator, which may or may not help, but until I see it, I'm not going to be a believer in that passing attack. So I'm going under 10.5.
Okay, I'm going to flip the script on you. I got over 9.5 for Penn State. Best bet. -170 on Bovada right now. What I will say about this bet, if you like over 9.5 for Penn State, just bet them to make the playoffs because it's -140. If they win 10 games, they're going to make the playoffs. So
-140 is kind of crazy, though, right? It's just me. I know it's a 12-team format, but all these lines are freaking me out. Like, they're the same odds as Ole Miss. It's kind of crazy.
I mean, Ole Miss plays in the SEC.
True, but the Big Ten's the Big Ten, bro. Respect the Big Ten.
Oh, we do got respect for the Big Ten. I am not as worried about this schedule. This schedule screams 10 wins to me. It just does. I think this 10 win mark for Penn State starts week 1. I think if they win week 1, it's locked. And I'll put everything on that. I am not afraid, honestly, of traveling to USC. They've done really well traveling out west in the past. And I just don't think that defense for USC is any good. And I think this defense is as good as it's been for Penn State. I think the edge group of Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, and Amin Hanover are some of the best in the country, and I think they're all going to ball out this season. You mentioned Andy Kotelnicki. I think he's provided a lot of life and a lot of motivation and a lot of confidence in Drew Aller this offseason. Just the way that Drew Aller has been talking about how bad he was last year and all the things he needed to improve on. I think this coaching staff has really lifted him up, and I think it's going to be a good year for them. But I do think this team is going to run behind this offensive line with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. I know they lost some big names on this offensive line, but I do think this group in particular is a little bit more physical and a little bit nastier than the group in the past. So maybe doesn't have the high upside in terms of pedigree, but I think they are dogs on the offensive line this year. So I think they're going to be really extremely physical this year. And I think this move with Andy Kotelnicki is just going to open up explosive plays. You saw what it did with Kansas. I think they're just going to hit on more plays, more explosives down the field this year. And I think it's going to open it up. The big concern for me defensively is the corner room. A lot of new faces. They brought in A.J. Harris, transfer from Georgia, who was a 5-star, but so I'm not as worried about that. It's the second guy who steps up, either Cam Miller or Jalen Kimber, who's transferred from Florida. I think they can stop almost anybody, honestly, not named Ohio State and Oregon in the conference. So I am not worried about this 9.5. I'm hammering this.
I know you mentioned they're deep in edge rusher this year too, but there is a lot of turnover on this defense as well, which is kind of like the backbone of their team, along with the running game. So you're not worried about the turnover at all?
It's less than you think. They rotate. They like Manny Diaz rotated a ton last year. So a lot of these guys who are getting more snaps like this year, like they've played a lot. So I'm actually not worried, and especially along the interior of this defensive line. Like last year, we had more like skill, finesse type of players. We have beef up front this year, which I think was definitely needed. You saw it in the games that they played Michigan and they played Ohio State. They got bullied on the interior of that defensive line. So I think that's going to help out big time. I think the linebacker room is going to have to come together a little bit without Abdul Carter back there as much. But I really like Kobe King and I really like Tony Rojas, who's started to play really well at the end of last year. So I do think I think the turnover in the secondary is where I'm a little bit more concerned. But I think up front they just have so much talent that they're a 10-2 team. That's just who they are.
Respect you riding with your guys.
It's good. It's good, not great, not elite. But I can just bank on them for 10 wins. They're going to the playoffs this year. Book it. -140 on Bovada.
Man, if you can't do it this year, you can't do it. So good luck.
Right. If I can't do it this year, I'll be dead. So I won't have to see it anymore. Let's move to the Big 12. The new look Big 12 has some new life after losing Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. They have added Arizona, Colorado, and Dion primetime in the Big 12. They have also added Arizona State and Utah, who is currently projected to win the conference in their first season. They're plus 320 on Bovada to win the conference. But I think the conference is kind of wide open after that, with a lot of teams with a lot to prove. Kansas State, Oklahoma State, UCF, Iowa State, Kansas, Arizona, West Virginia. I think all teams that could have really good seasons and could possibly push for a Big 12 title. This season opens up Utah at number 12 in the polls, Oklahoma State at 17, Kansas State at 18, Arizona at 21, and Kansas at 22. It'll be interesting to see how many of these teams at the end are vying for a college football playoff berth. How many are in that 12 to 20 range that are making late pushes. The odds for the conference champ are as followed. We've mentioned plus 320 for Utah, plus 380 on Bovada for Kansas State, plus 900 for UCF, plus 750 for Oklahoma State, and plus 950 for Kansas. Who you got as your champ for the new look Big 12?
Yeah, so this was the other conference that I was kind of struggling with.
This was tough.
I went with chalk with Utah, but
Okay.
I do have two dark horses who I do really like. But so for Utah, I mean, it's just so hard to bet against this team. Kyle Whittingham is probably the most underrated coach in the country. This guy, all he does is win. They also have a massive home field advantage in Utah. That stadium gets absolutely they start shaking. It gets so crazy. It's not the biggest, which I think makes it sound a lot louder and makes it a lot tougher to play. But That home field advantage is definitely not something to underrate. And they only have two preseason ranked teams on the schedule, and they get Arizona at home. I think they have to go to Oklahoma State at one point, if I'm not mistaken. But for me, it comes down to getting Cam Rising and Brent Keithy back. They lost both of them at the beginning of last year. Best two players on the team. They still ended up going having a winning record. But I'm such a big Cam Rising guy. He's probably the oldest starting quarterback in the country, I think. But we saw what he did when he's healthy, even when he's banged up. He's an absolute gamer and a winner. They won two Pac-12 titles with him under center. I absolutely love the guy as a college quarterback. I think he's one of the greats. And also, they brought in Dorian Singer from USC, and they get Micah Pittman back as well, who I think missed pretty much all of last year too. So it's a team that's getting a lot of reinforcement on the offensive side of the ball, and then on defense, they're always so damn stout. Logan Fanu, Junior Tafuna, who's a three-time All-Conference guy, and Lander Barton all returned up front for this team. They get Jeremiah Vaughn back at cornerback. So there's a lot of continuity on that side of the ball. And like I said, they're always just so stout defensively. On the offensive line, they kind of struggled a little bit last year. They're only returning two guys. So I think that's kind of like the big, I guess, red flag, if you will, for this team. But I have faith in them being able to coach them up, and just the overall just leadership and continuity that they have. I think it's just going to be too much for this conference to handle.
Yeah, they are really, really good. You mentioned it. Kyle Whittingham is just so damn good. Easily a top 10 coach in the country, just continues to do it year in and year out. But fuck that. I did not want to take chalk here. This could be a dark horse, even though they were vying for a conference championship last year. I'm going with Oklahoma State. I'm going with Mike Gundy. You can drive drunk every once in a while, right?
He's done that 1,000 times.
Sorry, kids. Don't drive drunk. Don't smoke crack.
That brings me to my next point. Don't smoke crack.
I'm taking Oklahoma State plus 800. They have 10 returning starters on offense. They have 10 returning starters on defense. 77% of the production is back top 5 in the country. Mike Gundy has 18 straight winning seasons. Let me repeat that. 18 straight winning seasons at Oklahoma State. That is absurd. This team is really good. They have all this talent back. I think a lot of this is going to be on quarterback Alan Bowman. Alan Bowman is 24 years old. He's from the 2018 class. And for those of you who remember that 2018 class, Trevor Lawrence was in that class. Justin Fields, Tanner McKee, Matt Corral, and Will Levis were all in that class. My boy Alan Bowman's still spinning it, baby.
That's insane.
He played way better down the stretch. He needs to limit the turnovers. I think this offense can still be really good. They are going to run through the Doak Walker Award winner, in Ollie Gordon, who's a top 3 running back in the country, the preseason player of the year for the Big 12. Their offensive line returns all 5 starters, highlighted by Joe McCloskey at center and Dalton Cooper at left tackle, who were both selected as preseason first-team All-Big 12 members. I love what Brennan Presley does. He was a guy that I watched for summer scouting at the wide receiver. Small slot receiver, caught 100 balls last year. They also got Rashad Owens back, who plays the X, who also had like 800 yards last year. This team was bottom 10 in terms of yards allowed and 86 in the country in scoring allowed. They need to be better on that side of the ball, but I think they have nowhere to go but up. And with all this continuity back, I think they can do it. They have 2 of the best linebackers in the country, arguably the best duo in the Big 12 with Nick Martin and Colin Oliver, who were both preseason All Big 10 members. The secondary, they have some questions, especially with the corner rooms. I'm looking for a big season from Corey Black, who played really well down the stretch. But I think if this defense improves, they are just going to ground and pound the shit out of people. And I think Ollie Gordon is that talented that he can run this team to a Big 12 championship.
I actually love this pick. You said it was like, what, plus 800, 850?
Plus 800 on Bovada.
Yeah, I mean, when you got the continuity, like you said, of returning, you have a star power and a star running back, and also a disciplinarian at coach. Because I mean, Mike Gundy said that Ollie Gordon's punishment for his arrest is he's going to get the ball 50 times in game one. That's going to be his punishment. So when you have a disciplinarian at head coach, anything's possible.
Right. Let's talk dark horses because I think there are a lot in this conference.
Yeah, my number one dark horse is West Virginia, as I mentioned before. I think head coach Neil Brown was on the hot seat last year. He was pretty much, I think
he was
he was pretty much gone. I think his bags were packed. They rattled off, I want to say 5 straight wins to end their season, or maybe even their last 8 games. They averaged 35 points per game. They finished 9-4, if I'm not mistaken. And this team returns their top 3 leading rushers and the running backs, Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson Jr., and then also Garrett Green, who has really proved himself to be a really good college quarterback. Good dual threat, good athleticism. This offense is going to put up points. I mentioned they scored 35 points per game about their last 8 games of last season. I think they return 3 offensive linemen, and they're 2 guys that they have to replace. I think the backups played, 4 games apiece. So they have a lot of continuity on the offensive side of the ball. On defense, they lost a lot of pieces, especially up front. I think that how fast they can get that defensive unit as a whole really together is going to really dictate how high their ceiling is. I expect them to start out a little slow. That's really the main reason I'm concerned about them week 1 is I think they may just get gashed on the ground against Penn State. But this is a team that's got a lot of firepower on offense. I'm really excited to see how they do. And then my second dark horse, just for star power, Arizona. Just when you have Noah Fifita and McMillan, 2 guys who are probably potentially Heisman candidates, I would assume.
Yeah,
it's gonna be hard not to mention them. I think they're plus 1100.
Yeah, I like that. And shout out Neil Brown. He definitely listens to the pod because on last year's preview episode, I pronounced Neil Brown as dead. I 100% did it. I said Neil Brown, first coach to be fired this season. And you can go back to the tapes and listen to that. So good for that guy. He turned it around, and hopefully they have a good season, even though they'll get lit up in week 1. My dark horse, if you've ever listened to the pod, you know where this is going. It's the Kansas Jayhawks. Shout out my boy Jalen Daniels. We're back. This is a cakewalk of a schedule, I think, for them. No Utah, no UCF, no Arizona. They do have Kansas State on the road. And I'm also a little bit worried about their home games because they're building a new stadium right now. So half their games are going to be at a soccer field, and the other bigger games are going to be played at Arrowhead, which doesn't give them too much of a home field advantage. But this team is just absolutely loaded on offense. I think they're going to put up so many points. Obviously, the X factor for this team is Jalen Daniels and his health. I think if he can stay healthy throughout the whole year, their offense is a top 25 offense. Easy. He's got a ton of weapons. Devin Neal, one of the best running backs in the country in the backfield. And they have a 3-headed monster at wide receiver who are all back, who have all played a ton of meaningful snaps. Lawrence Arnold, Quentin Skinner, and Luke Grimm, all very, very good players, all very capable of going off in any week. I don't have any real issues with Andy Kotelnicki not being there anymore. Lance Leipold already said they're going to run a very similar offense. I really trust Lance Leipold. Very good coach, very good program builder. He's going to continue to do it. I think he's due for a big-time job in the next few years. The defense, a little bit left to be desired, honestly, outside of Kobe Bryant at corner. Just nothing to write home about. But honestly, outside of Utah, this is like classic Big 12, where I don't think any of these defenses can stop anybody. So I think it's going to be a lot of shootout games in this conference. And I think if Daniel stays healthy, this could be a sneaky 10-2 team at the end of the year.
I was just going to say, what do you think the record for this conference winner is going to be? I think 10-2 is the best. I can see a conference winner coming out like 9-3, 8-4, and really just kind of causing some chaos in the playoffs.
If Utah stays healthy, I think they can run the table. I'm a little worried about Cam Rising's health. And I mean, how many times have we said Brent Keithy's going to be an X factor? It feels like it's been like 10 years. Like, I think it's playing college football.
3 years in a row, at least.
It's ridiculous. He was better than Dalton Kincaid at one point.
That's crazy.
All right, so Kansas plus 1,000 on Bovada to win the conference. Let's talk best bets for the conference. What do you got?
Mine's gonna be quick, and I this one hurt me to do, but Colorado under 5.5
Yeah,
wins.
I almost took this as well.
This is tough for me because I do
They
love
suck.
Dion, but I until I see their offensive line and defense improve, I can't. And this is a tough schedule, man. They're at Nebraska, at Kansas, at Arizona, at UCF, and then they're home versus Utah, versus Oklahoma State, versus Kansas State, and then versus Cincinnati. I think is even a tough game too. So
Ooh.
they have a really, really tough go of it. If they can, I mean, there's a lot of turnover on this team. Obviously, they hit the portal hard. They kind of just kick guys out to the street if they're not up for it. So who knows what anything can happen, especially when you have top end talent in Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter. But I don't know, man. Until I see it, especially up front and in the trenches, I just don't think I could pick them winning more than 5.5 this year.
Yeah, this offensive line, like they're talking about it, it's like completely revamped. Like, I mean, it had nowhere to go but up last year. The offensive line was so bad. They brought in a transfer left tackle too that I think got hurt, and now they have a true freshman. I forget that guy's name. He's big time. He was a big time recruit, but now they have a true freshman playing left tackle.
Wasn't he
I
like
am
gonna? Wasn't he like ready to like decommit from them too after he committed
Yeah.
and go to Maryland or some shit?
Yeah, so I'm definitely worried about them. This was definitely one that I also looked at. I also have an under for this conference. I felt weird taking like any overs for this conference because it was like such a crapshoot.
Yeah.
But sorry, Arizona State, your first year of the conference is going to be a rough one, I think. I got Arizona State under 4.5, minus 165 on Bovada. And for a team that doesn't have a ton of talent, when you schedule your non-conference games, like you need to schedule like the Citadel to beat up on them. They got Wyoming and Texas State for the G5s that they're playing, which are two of the 15 best group of 5 teams in the country. And then I know Mississippi State isn't a good team, but they're an SEC team that they could easily lose to. So you could possibly start 0-3 in the non-conference, which is ridiculous. I think Kenny Dillingham is a really good coach, and he's been around a lot of good programs, but I just don't think this team has much talent. They have to play Kansas, they have to play Utah, Oklahoma State, UCF, Kansas State, and Arizona. They arguably have to play the 5 best teams in the conference. I was reading about the whole Jaden Rashada issues, him leaving and transferring out. And like apparently they were saying that Jaden Rashada wasn't going to win the job, which I don't know about that. But Sam Leavitt from Michigan State is the starter. I have a hard time believing that he was going to beat out Jaden Rashada.
I thought he did beat. I thought it was like announced that he beat him out.
Like that's what they said, but I don't know about that. I think Jaden Rashada had some issues maybe with coaching staff, and
I think he doesn't. All he does is have issues with people.
Yeah, well, that's how he gets a lot of money. But the offensive line is really bad. The wide receiver room kind of got crushed by the transfer portal. They lost Elijah Badger to Florida, and defensively, I don't think they have much talent. So under 4.5, minus 165 on Bovada for Arizona State.
Respect the unders.
All right, let's move to the fourth and final. Feels weird, no Power 5, Power 4 with the SEC. Alabama is once again the defending champ for the SEC as the nation's best conference. Got even tougher this year with the additions of Texas and Oklahoma. However, Carson Beck and the Georgia Bulldogs lead the way as the favorites to get back on the podium. They are plus 190 on Bovada to win the SEC. This conference is absolutely loaded behind the Bulldogs with a lot of fresh faces, especially at quarterback, which will be very exciting to see. I love these young bucks who are coming up, and I'm so excited for them. Garrett Nussmeier at LSU, Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee, and Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma. So excited for all 3 of those guys. This conference is just going to be an absolute war every week, and I can't wait to see conference play. They open up with Georgia as the number 1 team in the country. Texas is at number 4, Alabama at 5, Ole Miss at 6, Missouri at 11, LSU at 13, Tennessee at 15, Oklahoma at 16, and Texas A&M at 20. So I'll read out some of the odds to win the conference on Bovada. Like we mentioned, Georgia plus 190 to win the conference. Texas is right behind them at plus 320. Alabama is plus 500. Ole Miss is plus 650. LSU plus 1,000. Texas A&M plus 1,400. Tennessee plus 1,500. Missouri is plus 1,800. And Oklahoma is plus 3,000. Lot of good teams in the conference. Ray, who you got taking the SEC?
I'm a Lane Kiffin man. I'm going Ole Miss.
God damn.
Plus 650. I think they end up getting it done. I love Lane Kiffin's scheme. I always have. I'm such a sucker for him.
You are a sucker.
I really am. And also, I love Jackson Dart under center. I think he's going to really play. I think he has the potential to play himself into the first round this year. I mentioned on the quarterback episode, I think he's got a lot of talent, a lot of juice in that arm. And they just have so much. They just absolutely murdered the transfer portal. I think they brought in 25 guys. Juice Wells is one of them from South Carolina. They already had Trey Harris here. This offense, I think, just with the scheme, their offensive line's a little shaky. 3 new starters, I believe. But this fast-paced scheme that Lane Kiffin runs, I think it's going to really help hide that weakness a little bit, or even uncertainty, if you want to call it that. Obviously lost Quinshon Judkins to Ohio State, but they have Ulysses Bentley, who averaged 5.7 yards per carry last year, because they rotate a lot of their backs too. So he got a lot of work. I think he had like 600 yards or so. And then they also brought in Henry Parrish from Miami, who had over 6 yards per carry. So I think they'll be just fine in that department. And then on defense, Walter Nolan they brought in from Texas A&M, who is one of my favorite players. Really athletic, versatile defensive lineman, as well as Princely Umanmielen, who I'm not high. I tried my best. I know you love him, but he's a long edge who really will help get off the quarterback rather. And then Chris Paul Jr., I think from Arkansas, Trey Amos, Isaiah Hamilton, Brandon Terrange on the back end of that secondary, all transfers. And also a low-key fun addition, I think, Daquan Wright from Virginia Tech, the tight end. So I think there's no shortage of weapons on this team, and there's no shortage of talent on that defensive side of the ball with how hard they hit the transfer portal. I think they get it done. I think Lane Kiffin's going to overcome the beast this year. I think he's going to finally be an SEC champion.
Nice. Love it. Who
do you got? You're going to go Georgia, coward?
I am going to go Georgia here. Man, I wanted to not pick them. They just have too much talent. Georgia plus 190 on Bovada. They have the best quarterback in the country in Carson Beck. They have the best offensive line in the country. Ernest Green, Dylan Fairchild, Tate Ratledge are all absolute studs, NFL players at the next level. They have some of the best tight ends in the country. Oscar Delp apparently is like killing people in camp. So I'm so excited to see him because they got Ben Yurcevic too from Stanford, who was a big time.
Okay, I was actually going to ask you to clarify. I didn't know if Delp was a Stanford guy or if the other guy. Okay,
no, yeah, Yurcevic was there, so I assumed that he was going to be the starter. I'm assuming that they run a lot of 2 tight end stuff this year, and just a running back room that's absolutely loaded behind Trevor Etienne too. The big question for me offensively, especially when we get down to the late part of the season, is who of these wide receivers outside of Dominic Leavitt steps up. No more Ra Thomas. Tough there. But I think they can run the ball and play defense and still win this conference. But I think when they get into the playoffs, they're going to have to be a little bit more dynamic on the outside. So I'm curious to see which of those wide receivers steps up defensively. I mean, they have dudes at every level. Mykel Williams is just poised for a breakout at edge. He wasn't our favorite player in summer scouting, but they're just talking so highly of him, and it seems like he's going to have like a first round NFL draft type of breakout this year. Nazir Stackhouse is back, a monster in the middle. Samuel Mondin is playmaker, a linebacker, and then Malachi Starks, arguably the best safety in the country, with him and Downs, first round level talent at safety, and Malachi Starks. I think for them defensively, corner is the big question for me. They obviously lost Kamari Lassiter last year, Tyke Smith. They lost Javon Bullard. So who steps up in that room? Right now they have Jonel Aguero, who's a 5-star coming out, and Julian Humphrey, who was a 4-star recruit. Both of these guys played less than 100 coverage snaps last year. So it'll be interesting to see if they can make an impact early. But man, they just have so many dudes and so many athletes. I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue for them to run the slate.
I mean, I'm just worried about. I'm just curious. Rather, I think you mentioned their wide receiver core, obviously, and just how they're going to be up front this year on the defensive side of the ball. Just because, I mean, we all know they recruit like absolute maniacs, but they have lost a lot of guys. Been a lot of turnover. I'm just curious who's going to be the dude that steps up on that defensive front.
Right. All right. Let's talk dark horses. There's a lot of them. I think I know where you're going to go, but
Who do you think I'm going to go?
Can I guess?
Yeah, guess.
Texas A&M.
Yeah, you're right. I did go Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I was debating between a couple of teams, but yes, I finished with them. It obviously starts with Mike Elko taking over that job. I think that's a real good hire for them. He's someone who they say is like super detail oriented, especially on the back end of that defense. They're saying that there's the fact that he's just so on top of every minute detail is really going to help transform this team. Something that Jimbo Fisher I kind of think was a little bit more lax on. But this, like I mentioned, this defense I think is going to be the heart and soul of this team. They got Nick Scarrington coming off the edge along with Shamar Stewart, and then on the interior, Shamar. Well, they have both Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart, I'm pretty sure, was a former 5-star as well. They still have a lot of these just highly touted prospects that they recruited out of high school under Jimbo, but they also brought in Des Ricks from Alabama, who's a 5-star cornerback. He should start at least one of those spots. And then on offense side of the ball, Connor Weigman, I've talked about him. He's my QB1 in the draft. Probably I think he's the best quarterback in college football. I know you mentioned it about Carson Beck, but I think Weigman has a lot more talent. And then as the receivers, Noah Thomas, they return, and Moose Muhammad, my boy. I think he was wide receiver 4 for me in summer scouting last year.
Ooh.
And for some reason, just like didn't get the ball. So I'm hoping that maybe no Evan Stewart, and with a full year of Connor under center, that maybe he gets a little bit targeted more and kind of brings himself back into the NFL radar. But this is a team I just think, I know it's tough for them with, especially in the first year of a new coaching staff. It takes a little bit of time in college, especially to just kind of get your guys in the building and just set the culture. But I do think this team has enough talent still in the building where they can make some noise.
Nice. Yeah, I was definitely looking at them. I had such a tough time picking because I really like Texas A&M. I really like Oklahoma this year, actually. But man, I can't quit me some Nico. Give me Tennessee. Respect. Plus 1,600 on Bovada. Schedule. They do play at NC State in a non-conference game. I think that's going to be a really interesting game for them, and I think that's kind of going to decide their season, honestly, early in the season. But they're at Oklahoma, they're home against Florida, they're home against Alabama, and they're at Georgia. So they do avoid Texas, Ole Miss, LSU, and Texas A&M. This team was really interesting last year with Joe Milton. They were not good offensively. This team still won 9 games last year. I was honestly shocked by that when I looked back. Now you got Nico coming in, and I think he's going to just take off. I have watched so much high school film of Nico over the last week and a half. I think I'm in love. I think he's going to absolutely ball out this season. And they got the dudes on the outside back this year that I think he's going to do it in Josh Heupel's offense. Brew McCoy is back from injury. That was a really tough injury he had last year that kind of never overcame. Squirrel White, really good receiver, and transfer Chris Brazel. I think he's from Tulane. He had over 700 yards last year at Tulane, so they got 3 dynamic wide receivers. Very experienced, very strong, very tough offensive line is back. They got a transfer left tackle from LSU, Lance Hurd, taking over that tackle spot. John Campbell is back at right tackle, very good player. Cooper Mays and Javontes Sprangens are 2 of the best interior offensive linemen in the country. So I'm really excited to see what this offensive line can do. And this defensive line in particular is very big, very experienced. They obviously have one of my favorite players in summer scouting in James Pierce, but on the interior, Omari Thomas, Brian Eason, and Omar Norman Lott, who had 5.5 sacks last year on the interior, are all back. The secondary is kind of an issue right now, but they did piece it together last year in some games. They lost 5 of their top 6 corners from last year. They have a lot of young, inexperienced guys, but a ton of athleticism and a ton of upside from what I've been reading about this group. But man, I think this offense is just going to be a different animal than what they were last year. I think it's going to be shades of what Hendon Hooker was doing in 22.
Yeah, this is one of the teams I was considering as my dark horse as well. I think with this Josh Heupel offense, they're always able to run the ball because they just spread the field so much. But I think with Noah, I don't even, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his last name. What's his last name? Nico what?
Iamaliava.
Okay, Nico I. That's what we're gonna call him.
Yeah.
But I think his dual threat ability and just his running ability too is.
I did not expect him to be such a good runner.
Yeah, dude, he's a very athletic under center, so I think that's going to help bring a new dynamic to this offense as well. But you did mention the turnover on defense, in particular the secondary. That is my only concern, and this conference is so goddamn loaded, like even more so than it normally is. I just look at the schedules for all these teams. There's just going to be a lot of variance in the dark horse category because teams are either going to sink or float real quick. So I'm curious to see how this goes for them.
Yeah, and with the secondary too, like the way I was also viewing it, like yes, they do have to play Alabama, yes, they do have to play Georgia, yes, they do have to play Oklahoma, but I think they avoid like the best quarterbacks and the best throwing teams in the conference. Like they don't have to play Weigman and Texas A&M, they don't have to play Nussmeier and LSU, they don't have to play Dart and Ole Miss, and they don't have to play Ewers at Texas. Like even the better teams that they get in the conference, like they're not the best throwing teams. So I think that the weakness of the secondary is mitigated a little bit in the teams that they play. So that's another reason why I really like them as a dark horse, plus 1,600 on Bovada. Let's talk best bets. Who you got?
I mean, you mentioned this team earlier, how you like them. I'm going under 7.5 wins for Oklahoma, even
money.
Ooh,
we got to fight.
Yeah. You went over with them?
I'm over 7.5 with Oklahoma.
Interesting. Yeah. So I'm not the biggest. I mean, I don't mind Brent Venables. I think his defensive scheme is really good, but his offense has just left a lot to be desired over the last couple of years. And I think a pretty much entirely new offensive line, if I'm not mistaken, going into SEC play. I think it's a recipe for disaster. And then not to mention, their schedule is just absolutely insane when you look at it. It is
crazy.
They have Tennessee at home. It's 15th ranked, but then they go at Auburn, home versus Texas, home versus South Carolina, at Ole Miss, and then they get Maine because, SEC loves throwing slapdick teams in November for some reason. But then to close it out, at Missouri, home versus Alabama, at LSU. I think there's just too many tough matchups in there. There's like at least 6 that I counted that are just at best coin flips for them. So I think under 7.5 is just it's just calling my name, especially at even money.
Yeah. This was a tough one, but as I just kept watching, and it's the young bucks that haven't played that I am just falling in love with.
I respect it.
Man, just the talk out of Oklahoma about Jackson Arnold has just been so positive. And if it wasn't so positive, like I don't think they would have let Dillon Gabriel walk. Like they would have brought him back if they didn't feel as strongly as they did about Jackson Arnold. But man, there's some buzz about him, like being like Caleb looking at practice. Like
pretty crazy.
I think that's a little crazy. I want to pump the brakes on that, but I think he's going to have an awesome year. I think this passing attack is going to be really tough to stop. Deion Burks transferring in from Purdue. They also have Nick Anderson, who can absolutely fly. The offense is just going to be really explosive. I think this season is going to come down to this offensive line. I think their core 5 are really good, but they have a lot of young guys who could be asked to step up in case of injury. So there's a lot of new faces and a complete overhaul, honestly, on that offensive line. Defensively, I think Venables is one of the best in the country at scheming it up. And man, I am just in love with this linebacker duo of Danny Stutzman and Kip Lewis. Those are 2 of my favorite players in the country. I am also a sucker for Billy Bowman in the back end playing safety. The corners are 2 guys that I highlighted last year who are really good players who are back. Gentry Williams and Woody Washington, 2 really good players, are just dogs. And they got some big-time transfers, too, on that defensive line. Caden Ward from Miami of Ohio and Dominic Williams from TCU were two really high prize transfer portal guys, both on the defensive line that they got. Very tough schedule, like you mentioned, but I'm buying into Jackson Arnold. So I'm going to take it over 7.5, minus 122 on Bovada. I will give out one more bet, though, because we have the same team. This won't be a wins, but a little action here for the Heisman Trophy.
Ooh.
Plus 2,200 on Garrett Nussmeier. Lock it in.
You're like a sucker for Garrett Nussmeier. I love it.
All right. You want to go through all the conferences, give our winners, and then let's pick our national champ. We'll pick the game. We'll pick the game, who's going to be in it, and then and the winner. So run through your conference winners for each.
So the ACC, I have FSU taking it. Big Ten, I have Ohio State taking it. The Big 12, I have Utah taking it, and the SEC, I have Ole Miss taking it.
Nice. So for the ACC, I got Miami plus 425 on Bovada to win the ACC. The Big Ten, I also have Ohio State plus 150. The Big 12, I have Oklahoma State plus 800 on Bovada. Cash that in right now. Lay all the wood on Oklahoma State. And then for the SEC, I have Georgia at plus 190. Ray, give me your championship game. Who you got?
I'm going to have it be a rematch. Ohio State versus Oregon. Ohio State takes it.
Ooh, the Big Ten with
Big
two
Ten
teams? Only. Oh, man. Damn, do I go chalk or do I get crazy? I'm going to go chalk because I do think it's the two best rosters in the country. I'm going to go Georgia, and I'm going to go Ohio State. And for your sake here, I'm going to pick the Georgia Bulldogs to win the national championship.
Yeah.
I would never say that Ohio State's going to win the national championship on this podcast. I will cancel this podcast before I pronounce that.
You're a hater. It's fine.
And if they do, I will congratulate them.
Okay, hater.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us here on Between Two Tackles. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed our college football preview. Stay locked in with us because the season is just getting started. We are so excited. I cannot wait for the start of the college football season, for the start of the NFL season. We're going to have our NFL preview coming out shortly, so stay locked in for that. As always, please rate and subscribe to the pod and follow our Twitter at 2tackles with the number 2. You can also follow our YouTube channel at Between Two Tackles with the number 2, and stick with us as we head towards week 0, baby. Let's go.
Let's go,
Appreciate you,
baby.
Ray.